Welcome, I'm Simon Cataldo, your state representative in the 14th Middlesex District, and this is the second episode of The Whole Truth on Acton TV. Today, you're going to meet Sheriff Peter Koutoujian of Middlesex County. Sheriff Koutoujian has become a national leader in criminal justice reform, prison reform, and healthcare delivery at our prisons. Among other accolades, Sheriff Koutoujian is the national president of the Major Sheriffs Association, and we're going to get drawn in today to the work that he and his team are doing at the Billerica Jail for Middlesex County. But before we get into that conversation, I wanted to share that, like anyone else coming into this conversation, I bring my own set of experiences and biases. I grew up in West Concord, a community with relatively little interaction with the criminal justice system, but then became a public school special education teacher in Harlem, New York City, where many of my students and their families were incarcerated or had been incarcerated at one point in time. Later on, I became a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Justice Department, where most of my work was prosecuting major public corruption cases, but I also spent a significant period of time helping the U.S. Attorney's Office run its mental health court and drug court, where I came to appreciate so much of the work that the sheriff is now doing relating to criminal justice, prisons, and mental health and substance use. Then finally, after I became elected as your state rep, I became House Speaker Ron Mariano's sole appointee on the Massachusetts Restorative Justice Advisory Committee, and am a big believer of that work, much of which relates to the discussion we're going to have today. So without further ado, I am excited to introduce you to Sheriff Peter Koutoujian. Welcome back. I'm joined here by Middlesex County Sheriff Peter Koutoujian. Sheriff Koutoujian, welcome on the show.
Great to see you, Representative.
It's great to see you again. And I wanted to start out here. You know, you and I, we talk a lot. We've had a lot of points of collaboration, but recently you invited me and several other members of the House and our staffs who represent communities in Middlesex County to the jail in Billerica. And, you know, I wanted to publicly compliment you because I've toured other facilities, my colleagues have toured other facilities, and one of the main takeaways of many profound takeaways I had from that visit was that you and your team showed us the breadth of the work and the spaces at that jail. It wasn't just one little program that you wanted to highlight. You took us everywhere. You showed us the good, you showed us the challenges, and I really, really appreciated that, and I respect that. So I wanted to start there, and I hope that kind of helps set the table for the conversation that we're going to have, because I'm really excited for my constituents to hear and learn more about the work that I find inspiring that you're doing in the jail. So maybe we'll just get started off by, if you could tell me a little bit about what goes through your mind when you're inviting people, whether it's public officials or anyone else, into the jail in what you're going to show them, because it is a stark contrast between other correctional facilities.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And by the way, thank you for taking the time to visit the facility. As you know, I invited a lot of legislators and not that many come, and I wish more would come, because I think it's important to see what goes on inside correctional facilities. Now, as for the people that are watching this, I mean, you will sense, I mean, firstly, let me say I love my job. And you can tell that I love my job, yes, right?
Yes.
And you can tell that I'm very proud of the programs and the treatment opportunities we provide at the Billerica, at Middlesex Jail and House of Corrections, right? I don't think you'll find a better run facility or facility with greater programmatic opportunities or treatment opportunities than the Middlesex Jail and House of Corrections. But I just want to say to everyone, you shouldn't have to come to jail to get good treatment. You should be able to get good treatment and educational opportunities in the community, so you never have to become justice involved. That being said, you know, a jail is not a fortress on a hill. It's part of a community, right? We have to not think of it as just something that's sitting separate from the rest of the community and isolated, because if you treat it like that, it will never be successful, because it has to be part of a community for it to be successful. And I mean that, number one, the community has to understand what's going on inside a carceral facility, for them, basically, so to speak. And the people that are incarcerated also have to understand that the community cares about them enough to come and see what they're doing and see how they're doing and ask their opinions, as you were able to do. I just think it's really important that we continue this. And in Middlesex, we have I try to get as many people, within reason, inside to see what we're doing for those very reasons. And it's just something that we started early and we've continued since then. And it's because of caring, leaders like yourself that we're able to provide that opportunity to people that actually are making the decisions that affect people that are incarcerated, also affecting the communities, and very importantly, affecting the families of those that are incarcerated at the same time.
I want to get into some of the really unique programs that you are running and modeling now at the jail. But before we do that, you had mentioned healthcare, and I thought that might be a good segue into your personal and professional background, because you have a unique set of experiences in public service coming into this job. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm sort of a unicorn among sheriffs nationally. My background really came, I was a prosecutor like yourself in Middlesex County here. You were in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I was also a public defender before I became a prosecutor, so I had that sort of perspective. Then I became a state representative, as you are now, and during the period of time I was there, I was able to lead the Committee on Health Care for 6 years as chairman and another 2 years as vice chairman prior to that. So quite honestly, the perspective I got from that, it helps me remarkably well with managing a facility. What's interesting is that if you understand the social determinants of health, right, the things that lead us to, premature death and illness and chronic illness, their education, substance use disorder, and mental health, and social network, and homelessness, and and all these things, right? And you take the things that affect our health, they're the same social determinants of justice involvement and incarceration too. So my experience in learning about, mental health and substance use disorder, medication-assisted treatment, trauma, all the things that are affecting the chronic illnesses that affect this population really prepared me well for being sheriff without ever knowing that someday I might actually want to be sheriff.
You mentioned, Sheriff, mental health, substance use. I have the honor of serving on the Mental Health and Substance Use and Recovery Committee in the legislature now. And one thing that really struck me was the prevalence among the inmate population of diagnosed mental health disorders and diagnosed substance use disorders. For people, even before they enter your jail, they have those diagnoses. Could you talk a little bit about that and some of the programs that you've started and are running now to address those challenges?
Certainly. Well, people should understand that those that enter our facility with a diagnosed substance use disorder, and by that's diagnosed, not, there's many more that have an addiction that are not diagnosed at that point. 47% of those that enter my facility have a diagnosed substance use disorder. Now get this number, it makes sense on the national level too. The number of people with a diagnosed serious mental illness are 57% coming into my facility.
And that, Sheriff, that is before they even go through any intake process.
That's right. That's when they come in the intake, and that determination is made from their medical history and the surveying their information as well.
It's an incredible number.
It's an incredible number.
It just makes you think about what is happening in those prisons.
That's right.
They become healthcare facilities essentially by necessity.
That's true. Listen, the 3 largest mental health treatment facilities in the country are LA, Rikers, and Cook County jails. We're the largest mental health treatment provider in Middlesex County, despite having world-class hospitals in our areas and within the county boundaries. It's quite frustrating.
Many members of the community and the public don't understand that so many, easily, I don't know exactly how the data breaks out of what you just explained, but that must be easily well over half, probably over 60% of people have either one or the other, mental health or substance use.
That's right. Well, the co-occurrence rate for those that have a substance use disorder, 92% of those people also have a mental health illness, right? And then when you can even broaden it a little bit further to the chronicity of the population, the chronic illness of the population, we're speaking about, HIV and AIDS and heart concerns and in kidney and asthmas and the other chronic illnesses, and then you add in the chronic psychological illnesses as determined by the National Commission on Correctional Health Care. 70% of our population is chronically ill. So it is a chronically ill population. It is a very sick population. We have an opportunity to help turn their lives around. But how sad it is that the jail can oftentimes provide the best opportunity to be able to allow people to turn their lives around with that comes a lot of baggage when you have to leave a carceral facility. I'm proud of the work that we do, but it's just a shame that people have to get this type of treatment in a carceral facility.
And that really came through in the conversation that we had with inmates. And by the way, I would just note that if what you had done was staged, then it was incredibly staged, because it didn't seem that way to me. It seemed very organic and fluid,
Right.
the conversations that we were having with the inmates, some of whom had very significant criminal records. And they said, very similarly to what you just said, that they had to come there to get to a point where they were going to be successful outside. And some of them had to come there multiple times. And just like you, there's a lot of tension in that statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, what a shame it is on our society that these folks have to go to jail to get that health care that you're providing. On the other hand, we know that status quo in terms of what we're delivering now, they're not going to get clean.
That's right.
Unless there's significant intervention.
That's right. I will say that I believe that for the most part, those that are with us at the Middlesex Jail and House of Corrections understand the mission. I mean, listen, our mission is to turn them out better than when they came to us, right? Because usually when you're coming to us, your life is not in a good place. You're struggling with a lot of different issues. In the way that we address those that are in our care is that reentry planning doesn't start, 60 days prior to release or 30 days prior to release. It starts on day one of your incarceration. So as soon as you get in, even pre-trial, we start taking a look at the, your life, and we actually we interview and we speak with them, lengthy questionnaires, that we then find out what the deficits in their lives, where they needed some help is, and then we determine individualized plans, not like one size fits all. Everything's unique. Is it education? Is it therapies that you need? Is it medication-assisted treatment that you need? Are there educational opportunities you can have, or vocational opportunities that you can have? And we come up with a plan individualized to that person that can then hopefully lead them to a more successful reentry. And by the way, our numbers show that this is the case. We've got, if you look nationwide, that the recidivism for jails, as opposed to prisons, right? The recidivism for jails nationwide is about 40%. In Middlesex, our recidivism rate is 32%. But then when you go into our unique programs that I know that we can speak about, they're significantly lower than even that 32%. Actually, each of them half or less than half of that 32% in the unique programs with some of the highest recidivating populations. We've actually cut that rate in half.
And one of the things that really impressed me was the amount of attention that you and your team are paying to data tracking. Because when I was there, and I think it's clear, a lot of what you're doing is going to be and is scaled up on the regional or national level thanks to your leadership. Let's talk a little bit about any of these programs in terms of, I know you're doing a lot inside of the jail and outside of the jail. Maybe we can start inside of the jail, because as you said, everyone says they're doing this stuff,
right?
But you really are.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about the nitty-gritty of this.
Yeah. The funny thing is that a lot of facilities will say they're doing that stuff, but they might be doing it, but are they doing it well? And are they actually tracking data? To me, vision without good data is something I say, because I speak about this nationally, about the collection of data, how important it is. Vision without good data is just a hallucination, right? You're flying blind, you're putting stuff up that may or may not be true, and then you're relying upon those numbers to make decisions for the future, which may not be accurate in any way, right? And also, you can also then make corrections in your program midstream, never mind just afterwards to sort of check on its efficacy. So data is really important to us, and data is so important. We've actually been published in, I think, 6 or 7 peer-reviewed journals so far, and about to be published in another one pretty soon, I believe. So this is high-level data we're tracking. And what it shows is that if you have unique needs for populations and you put them together and you treat them uniquely, that you can have unique results. And so some of the programs you saw inside were, the first specialty program I started was the housing unit for military veterans. It's a therapeutic unit, not just a housing unit. It's highly therapeutic. We have programs, we actually have partnerships, voluntary partnerships, by the way. It doesn't always cost money to do things because the community wants to be involved. With McLean Hospital, with Red Sox and Mass General and their home-based program. We did a modified version of their Resilient Warrior program that they do nationally, award-winning program. We do it inside. And so it's a therapeutic unit that has been referred to as best practice by many different veterans publications. Really proud of that. And in that one, the recidivism rate is 14%, right? So again, 32% Middlesex, 40% national. Another program we have is medication-assisted treatment program. We were one of the first jails in the country. Again, my experience as healthcare chair informed me about this, so I was ready to go and informed. And by the way, it wasn't as easy to get the community providers and everyone else ready to go as excited as I was, and that's why our first program failed. What I will say about this is the first program wasn't working well. I shut it down. We actually went out, we worked with an academic partner to design a new program based upon the bones of what we had done, improve upon it, and we relaunched the program that has been highly successful since that point. And that recidivism rate, I think, was 15%. And now, by the way, what's also important to note when you're dealing with opioid addiction and addictions overall is it's not as much the recidivism rate. That's really something you want to achieve. That's something always really good. The greater issue is harm reduction. How many people can we prevent from dying as a result of an overdose? And then even can we extend their life so that we have more opportunities to intercede, and keep them alive and healthy, right? And in that program, the recidivism rate was 15.5%, I believe. Again, much lower with this type of population. But then when you think about we're about to publish is we statistically significantly reduced overdose death after release from places of incarceration. Now, I think you might remember the governor's report a couple of years ago reported that those that are released, I think it's 7 to 14 days after incarceration, are 120 times more likely to die as a result of an overdose from those that from the general community. So in this one, we've reduced that. We've also extended their time until death. And then I'll just mention one other program, which is our young adult offender program, which you saw, which was the very first of its kind in the country. We did it with the Vera Institute, which is a highly regarded involved with incarcerated individuals and their rights and designing good programming. They were responsible for the Manhattan Project. So they actually, the Manhattan Bail Project, we developed a program for young adults that has worked really well. Again, it's a therapeutic unit using cognitive behavioral therapies and many other mentorships and certain programming inside that has worked really well. And that recidivism rate is 16%. So again, for one of the most highly recidivating populations. By the way, if you take that unit of the young adults in that same gang, different gangs, rival gangs, etc., and then you compare it to its cohort outside of that unit in the rest of the facility, that same age group, which is responsible for most of the disciplines and conflicts, and because they're just young men, this is how they behave inside carceral facilities. It's like almost no disciplines out of this unit and a significant amount of disciplines for that same age group in the rest of the unit because, again, they are usually involved in many of the conflicts that are going on. Another reason, another sign of the success of that unit.
So towards the end of our tour, we went outside, which itself was, I think, significant because you have outside programming for inmates, not just in kind of the big yards that you would typically think of from watching television or the movies, but there was actually a chicken coop that inmates were painting, and they were taking care of the chickens and cleaning that and feeding that. We got to speak with a bunch of those folks for a while, and then we went over to a place which this was really the highlight of me for the visit, where there were female inmates, which is not the majority of your inmate population, but this was a very unique program, and I was hoping that you could tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, that's and I remember, like, every time I go there, I get both inspired and I get emotional. And I remember
there were tears. There was tears during that conversation.
Crying, quietly, but they were really. It was really emotional to watch. These women that had been in another facility and then were allowed to come to our new pre-release center for women and to see them blossom and grow and to become closer with their families and prepare themselves for their life on the outside. I know that had they not had the opportunity to come to this facility, one that has trauma-informed programming and a lot of resources for women, which is different than the men, by the way, that they can now be successful on the way out with the support of their families in ways that they couldn't have been before. And I think it's important, women, their reasons for becoming incarcerated are different than men. But what really bothered me when I first became sheriff, we hadn't had women in our facility in our facilities for over 50 years, which, by the way, might not sound that bad, but the fact is they're going to the Department of Corrections, and meanwhile all the men are staying local, they're staying with our program, they're getting jail programming, which is different than prison programming, and they're having opportunities that the women weren't. Our men were able to go into pre-release, into community work programs. They were able to go to get to actually get work programs where they would wear a bracelet to work and be able to earn money so that when they left they would have a nest egg of monies to be able to get their apartments, etc. The women were not allowed that. So we started actually stepping into the lives of our women in Framingham to prepare them better, and then finally we were able to open up this center for them. And it's been remarkable, honestly. It's one of the most powerful programs that we have in the jail, and inspires me. I mean, you saw, like I felt, I think we were all inspired by these women and how far they had come and what we know they're capable of now too.
And to be clear, just so folks watching know, we're talking about some of these women had significant sentences.
Yes.
So they had significant offenses that they had been convicted
and they were
of.
very institutionalized when they came to us. They
Yes.
were closed off. They were hardened. They, as you can see at this, they're treated like human beings. They're addressed by their first names. They're allowed to cook. They're responsible for cleaning. They can get jobs, and they take care for that Project Earth program that you were referencing as well.
On that point, and one of the things that I took away from that from a legislative perspective is that the actual physical building was very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
They were responsible for cleaning it. There were cooking facilities, and they could live a lot closer than they would in a traditional facility to how they would need to live when they re-entered. And they talked about that. And so when I see that, it informs my perspective about an ongoing conversation that's happening in the legislature about putting a stop on all new prison construction or rehabilitation or reconstruction. And I would really like to see the programming that you're instituting now for those women greatly expanded.
Right.
It struck me that even though these folks were very institutionalized, there was no fence.
No.
They could have walked right off the yard
That's right.
and onto the street and put a thumb up. But as far as I know, that hasn't happened.
It has not happened. And by the way, if it does happen, if someone does not follow the rules, then they're sent back to the Department of Corrections. Now, by the way, I'm going to be very clear about this. There have been some that have been sent back that we've also accepted back. They've actually said, "Hey, look, I'm really sorry. I made a mistake. I want to come back." We'll interview them and speak with them and reassess their situation and then bring them back as well, because one offense should not be a life sentence for people.
Yeah, as I just sit here and hear you talking about this, Sheriff, it is incredible what a great sheriff can do compared to what a sheriff who might not have a lot of empathy for that population. Yeah. As you know, I prosecuted Sheriff Joe Arpaio out in Arizona, and just even that case aside, it was very clear that there was a much different approach.
Yes,
and I think here in Middlesex County, we're seeing the benefits of your approach. We're winding down here. We're taping this right before Thanksgiving, and I think it's going to air after Thanksgiving. So, and I know that you have some special Thanksgiving things that you do. So I was hoping you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is, we'll be giving away Thanksgiving dinners for veterans with the deputy reserves that we have, which is a really powerful moment to support those that might struggle with affording a Thanksgiving dinner or have to make that choice between paying an electrical bill or a gas bill or their car payment and having that dinner, right? We don't want them to have to do that, especially for those that served us. But what's really important is we started a family support services program in the jail, which is the first of its kind in the country. It's built upon my experience and your experience of being a state representative of constituent services. No one was helping the families of those that were incarcerated. We didn't even think about them. And so I knew they were out there, so we actually started a unit that has helped over 4,100 families with tens of thousands of minutes of phone calls and engagements. And what we did this year, we're actually giving Thanksgiving dinners to those families of incarcerated people. So just recently, I was in a parking lot in front of the jail, down on the street side, and while their loved one was up there in the facility, we were giving their family a dinner and then coloring books, and we had children there to engage with their children. It was one of the most, I'm getting goosebumps right now speaking about it. It was a really wonderful day and a great way to start the holiday season.
That's a good note to end on. The work you do is hard on a number of levels. It's intellectually hard, emotionally tough. I have a lot of respect for what you and your staff are doing, including the COs, the nurses, the doctors. Right. There's a lot of people.
They're doing great work up there. And by the way, and I love my job too. So it's hard, but I love my job. That makes it easy.
Sheriff, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you for tuning in to The Whole Truth. This was our second episode. I'm looking forward to the third. I'm Simon Cataldo, your state representative in the 14th Middlesex District. Don't hesitate to reach out to me by email or my office phone number. You can follow what we're doing on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll be back soon.